Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here today. And thank you to Dr. Copeland and Dr. Hill and all the organizers of this Guardian Premium Virtual Open Lecture. I'm delighted to be with all of you today. I'm going to be speaking with you about navigating the e-classroom for innovation and change today. We will discuss the disrupted world and higher education's role in it, how to foster our lifelong learners for active learning, and how technology plays a role, and the best ways for measuring learning in the e-classroom. Thank you for joining me on this talk today. First, I want to talk about COVID-19 and the unexpected and unprecedented challenges it's presented to all of us as educators. We've had to learn from home emergency instruction, shift courses online, and shift our planning and activities and assessment. It's exposed increased inequities in access to the resources of education. And our students and faculty are facing significant mental health challenges. This is the context within which we are trying to navigate the e-classroom. It's the next normal of disruption. And this is happening amongst a shifting talent demand from the labor force because of the shifts in the fourth industrial revolution. Here in my slides, you see the 8 different technologies that are making up these changes: artificial intelligence, augmented reality, blockchain or distributed ledger technology, drones, the Internet of Things, robotics, virtual reality, and 3D printing, also known as additive manufacturing. Together, these technologies change what it means to live and work in our societies, especially our urban cities. Once we have 5G network capability and other emerging technologies such as soft haptics and quantum computing, these technological capabilities will be amplified. The result is the tasks that are being performed in the workplace by humans are changing. Pattern-based work is now automatable. When different jobs are deconstructed by organizations, the pattern-based work is replaced by algorithms and machines. And the more dynamic and shifting work is something that we need to train our students to be able to handle. This requires resilience and agility, something we've been forced to demonstrate during a remote emergency instruction in COVID-19. Here we see some of the ways in which firms are deconstructing and reinventing jobs. The optimizing task for the goals of the organization is taking place, and what is able to be automated is beginning to be automated. This rolls out more quickly or slowly in different industries. For example, suddenly radiologists are being automated. The key task they perform of looking for patterns that represent cancers and other illnesses in humans are now able to be done much better and quickly by algorithms. So we can reconfigure the tasks that radiologists perform, perhaps communicating better with patients, for example, but they need to be retrained and reskilled. This is why interactions with our students are so important. We need to figure out how we help our students learn in a disrupted world, such as the case of the radiologist that needs to redefine themselves in the workplace while keeping their job. And we also need to figure out in the academic context how we connect to employability while still staying true to our academic freedoms and not purpose fitting for a given industry without expanding the broader knowledge and context of those disciplinary expertise. Information transfer is a necessary and insufficient characteristic of higher education today. It is no longer sufficient to simply lecture information to students. Recording lectures, posting them synchronously or asynchronously, however you're getting that information to students, it's the beginning of the journey, not the purpose of the course. This is what's changing in higher education. The number 2 skill in demand in the workplace today is active learning and learning strategies. This according to the World Economic Forum, but also according to many in the employability and talent fields and world. This means no matter what we're teaching our students, we need to talk to them about the process of their learning, not just the outcome of their performance on a given test or exam. This is true whether this is quantitative or qualitative work that the students are putting out. It's not just the formula, it's how they solved it. This is what employers are looking for too, because what they need to know in the workplace today will change in the next 5 years. So employers need people willing to change with them and the industries they work in. Active learning is an element of lifelong learning where the characteristics can be quantified. This is the American Association of Colleges and Universities rubric for lifelong learning. It's any purposeful learning activity undertaken on an ongoing basis with the aim of improving knowledge, skills, and competence. This is what we want to embed as a mindset and a goal in our students. When we are in the e-classroom, we can change how we've been talking to students, enhance the emphasis on these characteristics and traits, and use our course content to deliver awareness, cognitive awareness of those skills. Now, these skills are curiosity, initiative, independence, the ability to transfer knowledge from one context to a new novel context, and the ability to reflect on what we know, to learn and unlearn new things. So these are the skills we want to embed in our courses. These are the skills we want to embed in our learning objectives, in our assessments, and in what we measure. Active learning is how we get there, by being student-centered rather than content-centered in what we're delivering. Yes, the content matters, it's essential, but as I said, it's insufficient. So how do we empower our students to pursue active learning in the e-classroom? How do we get them to engage differently than they might have in the pre-pandemic face-to-face environment, which may have been passive absorption of information? And how can technology help us get there? For students to learn new skills, they need practice applying those skills and to receive high quality, consistent feedback on that practice. And there are technology-rich activities that we can use to align to our learning objectives, but technology should not just simply be laid out there. For example, simply turning on the discussion forum in the learning management system isn't sufficient. We need good prompts. We need to embed it in the learning objectives. We need to tell the students exactly how to perform in that discussion forum. And so as educators, our opportunity, not just our obligation, but our opportunity is to work with librarians and educational technologists and the literature from our disciplines to explore ways that technology can capture student thinking, not just measure student academic integrity. This is where the benefits of the e-classroom and what we've learned during COVID-19's remote instruction can really help us improve as educators. So technology can help by providing students with visual ways to organize their knowledge and can help them remember and use that knowledge and measure their ability to use that knowledge. But this is also about us as educators organizing the knowledge, skills, and competencies we want them to have in the classroom and beyond the classroom. How do your students demonstrate their learning? Is it through a survey, a Qualtrics test, multiple choice questions, essays, equations? What are you measuring when you mark those assessments? Is there a 5% off for being late? And does that demonstrate knowledge? Why do we need them to be 5 minutes? To be in time for the deadline? What are we reinforcing at that point in a society where we're asking everybody to be more flexible because of the negative impacts of the pandemic? Similarly, what does attendance mean? Camera on, camera off, on time, engaging, posting in the chat? How do we define this for them? And how do we help let technology give them ways to feel comfortable in participation? My answer is to align to the learning objectives of the course. Here is a nice schematic on the active verbs we can use in learning objectives on syllabi. And the color scheme should align to the pitch of the course and whether or not students are being introduced to a concept, practicing deploying that concept, or demonstrating skill in that concept. So introduction, practice, demonstrating. So for example, in a lower level course, it doesn't mean that students don't begin with higher order thinking around evaluating and creating new knowledge, but the weight that that receives in your assessment would be lower. And new knowledge can be low stakes or no stakes. Just practice using the information, right? And in this way, you could send out an electronic quiz, but not grade it. Just show people where they're at. This decreases the inclination towards academic integrity breaches or cheating. So we think about these verbs and we think about the technologies available to us, whether that be the learning management system, or Google Docs, or breakout rooms in the Zoom classroom or the Moodle classroom. And then how can we use those different techniques to allow students to practice their thinking capabilities, to apply the skills and competencies we want them to have without feeling threatened by the grade outcome. Grades are good to incentivize motivation, but there's other ways to do that. And sometimes technology is a nice way to help students see that they're learning without being subjected to those assessments. Similarly, using these verbs and thinking about lifelong learning, that curiosity, that independence, that initiative, as part of metacognition is really valuable. So here in this schematic, you see the cognitive process dimension that many people are familiar with. Remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, create. But we also then on the other side have the knowledge dimension, facts, concepts, procedures, and metacognition, thinking about your own thinking. So we remember facts, we understand concepts, but as we build those cognitive abilities, these are literally building blocks, which is why I like this schematic. You need to buttress the higher order thinking and the higher metacognition with these lower order thinking skills. And that includes content, but that's why the content is insufficient. In the e-classroom, we can get students to think about their own use of techniques, to deconstruct their own biases and reflect on their own progress. We can do it in the face-to-face classroom as well, and we will again someday, or the mask-to-mask classroom as some countries are experiencing now. But talking to students about these skills and competencies, embedding our disciplines in them, and connecting them to what our students care about is the best way forward, based on the literature and student feedback. This is what they want. They want it to be real, authentic, about them and their relationship to the world. And this is repeated in many places about Generation Z contexts. So the competencies to foster learning the competencies to foster can be expressed in our learning objectives, but also in our assessments. So on the left here, you see affects and competencies that are often expressed as goals of higher education. The ability to perform inquiry and analysis or demonstrate creative thinking, good written and oral communication skills. But how do we put these into the syllabi and then into the e-classroom? We could do an activity where we ask students to design processes and identify strategies for doing something rather than actually going and doing it. This is something we can do in the e-classroom. What would you learn from a museum in another country if you could? For example, ask the students to design a process for learning about a museum and what it has inside. This is about problem solving, right? So this is a way to deconstruct the skill into actions that you can assess and provide feedback on. Here's another schematic. You can see I'm a fan of schematics. But here we have comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, evaluation, and knowledge in the purple. These are the languages of Bloom's taxonomy of higher order thinking expressed slightly differently. And this is taken from the Ministry of Education here in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. In the yellow ring, they have the learning objectives. In the green ring, they have samples of the types of assignments or outcome products that help students practice and demonstrate those skills. So for comprehension, which is where we normally give basic tests and quizzes, We might say, discuss a concept, paraphrase an argument, confirm a given hypothesis. And the way they might do this is through diagrams, posters, graphs, constructed analogies, presenting a speech, maybe making a podcast. But we can assess comprehension in so many more engaging ways than a multiple choice exam, for example. And I know many of you already know that. It's also about time and efficiency. Where do we get the time to design these new activities, create the rubrics for these new activities, and grade these new activities when we're already stretched at home and at work because of the pandemic? Totally viable question. And there are ways in which we can use technology to make this more efficient. So for example, we can design an online active learning activity where the students brainstorm within a Google Doc. Now here you're going to have to ask them to turn off their cameras because they may not have the bandwidth to run both the online course assignment and the system that they're streaming to be available via video. So you may tell everyone we're going to leave the Zoom call, or whichever platform you're using. We're going to go into the Google Doc in small groups, and everyone's going to answer a question. This way, the faculty member, you, the instructor, can go in and aggregate the different ideals that are coming from a single list from the students, or from multiple lists if you have a very large class. So if you have 200 students, you could break the groups up into groups of 10, have 20 different rooms, for example. And you can monitor the brainstorming processes that's happening across those rooms. You're allowing the students to practice categorizing and differentiating class concepts. These can be equations, vocabulary, authors' different opinions, whatever your disciplinary need. But it lets you see where there may be specific questions or consistent lack of clarity on an issue in real time, so that you can bring everybody back to the group, away from the Google Docs, and have an open discussion. Now, if you have 200 students, you could ask people to report out. Say you had 200 students and you had those 10 groups of 20, you could call on 3 groups to report out. You could invite them all to look at each other's Google Docs by sharing the links in the chat, for example. And then you as the instructor or your teaching assistants can look for patterns during the class or after the class to pull out from those brainstorming exercises. Similarly, mini mind map exercises are great ways to help the students visualize and construct their understanding of information. And this one is very hard to cheat on if you come up with interesting prompts or course-specific ways to connect the knowledge. Here, this is a linear example I'm giving on arranging terms in logical order in biology using arrows, but mind maps can be much more complex than that if you want them to be. So here I have an example where a student is using highlighters and different shapes to denote different types of relationships. And here what you want to do is focus on the instructions and then have students reflect on that process. So you as the educator create focused questions that will guide the student to make these mini maps, and they can be in groups. Again, if you have 200 students, the dialogical learning that can happen in groups of 5 is very exciting. And you cut the grading down to 20% by putting them in groups of 5, right? You're looking at much fewer mind maps. You generate a list of relevant concepts and organize them before constructing them. The students need to do this. And then you ask them to reflect and revise on their mind maps. Maybe they provide a brief audio message explaining them, and the students go in and explore and comment in a discussion forum. Again, this isn't necessarily graded. It can be, but it's a learning activity to help embed the concepts for them. And again, alternative resources can help motivate students to dig into this material. So if you're going to do a brainstorming exercise or a mini mind map or something like that, what new material can they dissect in order to dig into this outside the textbook? So are there virtual field trips they could make to connect resources in a library or a virtual laboratory to a concept or a philosophy that's being explored in your course? How can you bring your own research into the classroom and show them how you make these connections? Could you bring in a guest lecturer from within Trinidad and Tobago or outside, whatever the purpose of the course? to connect them to the global world and motivate them to feel connected to that global world as a global citizen. So sometimes students like to be passive absorbers of information, and showing a good movie is a great way to do that. Just accompany with it with some kind of task, some kind of reflective practice. Where do they see the vocabulary in action in the movie? Where do they see use of the mathematical competencies inside the documentary? Where do they see examples of the various concepts you're discussing in your course in the movie? Teach them to pull that out of the real world into the classroom. And if you're going to do all these things, of course, you have to rethink your methods of assessment. Here, I want you to ask yourself, which kinds of assessment best demonstrate the skills and knowledge of your learning objectives on your syllabus? Are the assessment practices you're using simply the easiest to grade, or are they actually helping measure learning in your course? Maybe it's a bit of both. Do they need to be enhanced? Could you check on them? And is there a way technology could make this better for them and more efficient for you? These are the questions to ask 18 months into this pandemic. What can we be doing differently? And what have we already learned that's easy to apply? Alternative assessments to in-person tests are all over the internet right now. Academic integrity is a concern, and wanting to dig deeper in the learning is also a concern. So you can consider video presentations, podcasts, visual assignments, multimedia deliverables of all kinds. You can use automated grading platforms such as Perusall. Perusall uses a reading annotation project, which is ideal for courses around 40 to 80 students. And it's automated grading, and it gives great feedback to the students. It's a good assignment. And even if you don't trust it to do your grading, which you can look into, but it's very well vetted, you could use it as a learning tool. And you can always use peer feedback. But if you do that, teach them how to give good feedback in your discipline. Giving feedback is one of the main things we do in the professional world. So teaching them how to give peer feedback is a very good use of your time and theirs. Add it to the learning objectives if it's not there. And no matter what you do, when you change or augment or enhance your types of assignments for the e-classroom, think about the prompts that you're writing for your students. What do you want the assignments to require the students to do? And tell them that. You want to think about how students define, illustrate, or compare or analyze the data you're asking them to use. Have them understand the research requirements. It's different for each of us as faculty members, what we expect, and it's not intuitive to them. So tell them what they need to do. If you can, be flexible. And then when you've designed all of this, try and do the assignment yourself. Because one of the things we're finding in the e-classroom is that students' workloads have greatly increased. While faculty and instructors work to change 1 hour of face-to-face synchronous instruction into hours of asynchronous homework. So try and do the assignment yourself, see how long it takes you, and consider whether or not that's an appropriate amount of time to ask your students to pursue these assignments. And bring the real world into your assessments or just into your classroom conversations. Try to compare and contrast how museums, theaters, and concert halls have been impacted by self-isolation and confinement efforts in 2 different countries, for example. Or how will TNT address Carnival 2022, given the public health crisis? Bring these ideas to your students. See them as problem solvers. They will like being asked and they will want to find solutions. The assessment then is in the process of finding the solution, not the value per se of the outcome. So you want to construct a rubric that rewards the process of identifying the solutions. This can be in a research proposal. This could be in a draft. This could be in assessing the quality of the bibliographic resources they identify. But breaking that broader assessment down into parts lets them apply that real world context, that authentic learning, to the processes we want them to develop as lifelong learners and active learners. If you do all these things, write it down. Document your efforts. Survey the students and ask them if they like what you're doing and how you're doing it. Ask them what they like about what you're doing. Invite a colleague into your Zoom class. It's so much easier for us to enjoy each other's teaching right now because we don't have to make all the commute time to come to each other's schedules. If you're in hospitality, visit engineering. If you're in engineering, visit the arts. If you're in economics, visit the sciences. Learn what each other are doing across disciplines, and then give each other feedback on that. You can also collect data from your LMS analytics, but there you want to realize that's just raw data. So you have to give it meaning on its own. Students not downloading the readings doesn't mean they aren't doing the readings, for example. It likely means they're not using Moodle to find the readings. So these are the kinds of things you want to corroborate by asking your students what the context of this is. But by making your good teaching visible and documenting it, you make a narrative for your teaching trajectory over time that can be used in tenure, promotion, renewal, and can be used for applying for teaching awards, teaching-based grants, and many other things, new jobs. So always document all this effort. It's time-consuming. It shows a reflective practice on your part, and it's good work. So make sure you write it down in a way that you can tell other people you're doing that good work. So it's not invisible. So I invite you to think about what enhancements you can make in your e-classroom and course structure. What have you already learned that you want to better evidence is working, right? So could you add a question to a midterm course evaluation to ask the students if they like an assignment that's new that you've created? And I don't just mean like, but what elements of it have helped their learning, right? These are the kinds of questions you want to ask your students to check if these interventions are working, to check if it's having the intended effects on how your students are motivated in the e-classroom. And everything I've said doesn't matter if you don't have the ability to center your own wellness, spirituality, and self-care. We know that this pandemic is traumatic. It's ongoing. We are not done in any way, shape, or form. We're 18 months in. We're more used to the reality of masks and social distancing and missing family members. But the types of self-care we have to pursue need to be much more targeted and conscious. Talking to each other, letting our students know we see them. We know this is hard. And the number one thing we can all do, regardless of ethnic, religious, identity differences, is work on our sleep together. We all have the same brains that need the same amount of sleep. Lack of sleep hurts learning, increases stress, can cause physical unwellness. So when we talk to our students about how they prioritize their learning, we need to talk to them about, for example, not pulling all-nighters. It's not good for them. I don't let assignments be due past 8 p.m. I will not accept an assignment between 8 p.m. and 9 a.m. Can you message that kind of wellness to your students as well? And can you talk to them about the wellness you pursue for yourself? As educators, as parents, as family members, and as friends, we are tired. So centering this wellness before everything else I mentioned is extremely important. So reflecting on that for yourself as well is very important. And with that, I'm very excited to transition into the question and answer section with all of you and speak with Dr. Zafarin, with all of you about your reactions to this presentation and what enhancements you hope to take to the e-classroom next. Thank you all so much.